Hey guys, this is AJ from Strategize on the air. Welcome to the very first FutureLab Talks Direction. And not only is it an honor to be one of the first mentors to host a live talk on behalf of FutureLabs and my own organization, Strategize, but also it is awesome that FutureLabs is going to be bringing on more and more mentors on the same platform. So I'm one of many that's going to be happening in the near future, so stay tuned. So what are we going to talk about today? So the topic today is about creating a profitable purpose. And effectively, how did this come up? So a couple of weeks ago, I was talking to one of the co-founders of FutureLabs, and we were talking about passion and purpose. And it so happened that when they launched their first webinar series, and they said, "Hey AJ, why don't you come on board and do the first of many?" I thought it was pretty awesome, but more importantly, I thought, hey, you know what? This is a topic that a lot of students struggle with, and I don't think just students, but I think working professionals, because I think there's a lot of confusion around the difference between passion, purpose, dreams, and so on and so forth. So what I'm going to do in this just over maybe about 45 minutes to an hour, I'm going to go through a step-by-step guide around how you would go about creating a profitable purpose, and a purpose being something that is a dream of yours and a passion or something that you've been yearning to do, and what are the steps that you can take to achieve those dreams in reality. So I always start off saying this with my audiences wherever I go and train, that dreamers stay dreamers without massive action. And that is very, very true, because I think essentially a lot of us have these brilliant ideas floating up in our heads, but we fail to take action on them. And why have I said massive action? Because I think there have been times in my own life where I have, not by intention, but sometimes even by fluke, gotten up and taken a real initiative on something that I feel very personally about, or very strongly about. And I've ended up, reaping those rewards, because not just have I created what we call a movement where other people believe in what I'm saying, but also I've built up my own confidence to pursue those dreams and those passions. So like I said, I like to start off this webinar with saying this line: dreamers stay dreamers without massive action. I want you to remember that, because that is something that I'm trying my level best to do as well. I'm not perfect at it, but I'm definitely trying my level best. So let's move on. So the first thing that I think is very apparent in anyone's situation around pursuing a life's purpose or a dream or whatever you call it is effectively having the will to act on it. And as one of the greatest of greats, Muhammad Ali, said that champions aren't made in gyms. Champions are made from something they have deep inside them: a desire, a dream, a vision. They have to have the skill and the will, but the will must be stronger than the skill. And this goes back to a lot of what I do with schools, universities, and corporates as well. I talk about the importance of emotional intelligence, or what we call in some countries SEAL, which is the social and emotional aspects of learning, and how it's so important for education to reform itself today, to become more experiential and more balanced between IQ and EQ, because a lot of the skills that you pick up in school don't necessarily end up being the same skills you need to succeed in a career, right? Unfortunately, a lot of people end up settling for things in life. So they have dreams, but as time passes, they let others, including their parents, their teachers, their girlfriends, their wives, their husbands, and so on and so forth, their friends, tell them why it's a good idea or why it's not a good idea. And what happens is people end up listening less to themselves and more to the world around them. So really, it boils down to developing a consistent will that is complemented by gaining knowledge about that particular dream that you have. And without the both, either one, on its own can't survive. So it's very important as a student, when I was growing up, I wish somebody was around to tell me this, that it's important not just to be able to take initiative, but it's also important to continually pursue knowledge outside of myself and to take that knowledge, assimilate it into my own mind, and create it in my own style, create it in my own thoughts and my own articulated words. It's very important for you to develop that ability, because as you move further in life, you'll realize that if you are moving towards a career where you have to engage with teams, with your boss, with your secretary, with partners, to read them and how to articulate the words you want to use at any given time. So that's one thing that I really want to share, and I look up to Muhammad Ali for that, because he definitely was an icon and an example of this very lesson. So let's jump in a bit deeper. This is something that I also share many times at different speaking engagements that I've done. When you know who you are, you know what to do. And that in essence is what a profitable. Not supposed to be focused just on the profitable part of that statement. You are supposed to look at both of them in tandem, in balance, which means that we're looking for something that gets you up in the morning, gets you really excited, and something that you really, really look forward to doing. And when something, and similarly on the negative side of that, if it's not happening in any given situation, it makes you feel upset and angry. You want to express yourself in that particular way or that particular dream. But I think before you can do that, before you can discover what your purpose is in life, you really need to know who you are. And that brings me back to what I mentioned earlier. It's very important for you to sit down and ask yourselves questions. Because I think we live in an age of digital where there's so much of external noise. And by external noise, I don't mean literal noise only. I mean, there's so many distractions around us. We've got devices on us all the time. We're in front of a screen more than 40% of the day. We're interacting not just with human beings, but we're also spending a great deal of time interacting with technology, devices today. Social media bombards us with information every day. The articles and the accessibility of the internet does the same. So how do we learn to quiet our minds? How do we learn to know who we are in the midst of all this distraction? And that's something I want you to think about, because really, I truly believe when you know who you are, you know what to do. And in essence, that is what a profitable purpose is when you understand what is it that you really were placed on earth to do, and what is it something that really inspires you. And if you feel like, when you talk about it and when you engage with other people around you, you feel like, hey, people around me are really impressed and they really feel the passion when I speak on the subject, then you know that that's a hint. It's a hint that maybe you're onto something, and that could be connected to one of the purposes in your life, or the purpose in your life, right? So having a purpose or discovering a dream or having a dream is something that almost everyone has. But what people often don't do is the ability to articulate and break down that dream. And this is one of my favorite sayings. I didn't say this. This was actually said by someone else. I'm not too sure who this was. I think this was Simon Sinek, actually. And he wrote this down in one of his books or one of his articles. A goal broken down into steps becomes a plan. And a plan backed by action makes your dreams come true. And I want everybody listening to this, let that sink into them for a while, because I think it's very important for us to understand that if we have dreams, massive action doesn't just mean impulsive action. It means a strategy. It means a plan. And you need to wake up every morning and I mean you actually should whip out a piece of paper one fine day and write down what your goals are, and then break down those goals into steps. How are you going to achieve that 1 year from now, 5 years from now, or 10 years from now, right? So a plan backed by action, I sincerely, truly believe it does make your dreams come true. So on that same note, though, I do want to say that at the end of the day, while I'm sharing my opinions on how I feel students, working professionals, and all of us should approach finding a passion and turning it into a profitable purpose, I do want to say, not so much as a disclaimer, but more so as probably a perspective that, one shoe does not fit all, meaning that this is my opinion professionally on the basis of the last 10 to 12 years, working across different corporates, different companies, big and small, working in large teams, managing markets that are local, regional, etc. And the sum of all that has taught me that, it's truly important for people to understand their purpose in life, because it really lends very highly to how successful you will be moving forward in your career. Waking up to just a job or waking up to a purpose creates two entirely different people. And I truly believe that. But at the same time, I do want you to keep an open mind to all the listeners, because one shoe doesn't fit all. So what might work with me may not necessarily work with you. And that's not a bad thing. It just means that you need to find your own way. And I'm hoping that today's webinar would be more so of a guide for you to sort of pick up and see how what I share with you in my perspectives may benefit you in your own lives moving forward. So I notice there might be a few questions coming up on the live chat here, and rest assured, if what I would like to do is probably, while you ask questions, feel free to jump in and ask those questions anytime. But what I do is I'll probably answer them at the end of the webinar series, simply because it creates a sort of an interruption in flow and thought. But so it'd be great if I could have, I can see all your questions here on the side of the video chat, and I'll come back to you guys a little bit later at the end of it. So where was I? Yeah, so I think before we jump in any deeper about how to turn your dreams or a purpose into something that would generate revenue, and not just revenue from a monetary perspective, but also revenue from a perspective of you being content in life and you being happy. And that's also a type of revenue, because you want to be somebody who is truly happy contributing and doing what you're doing. And that truly is a purpose. But I think what we need to also acknowledge is that we live in a very new age in many ways. We live in an age where, as Simon Sinek says, and how many other critics and gurus talk about, where we have almost a 50% millennial workforce today. Not across the world, but in majority of the countries we're seeing today, a lot of the urban environments bring about 30 to 40, if not 50% of a millennial workforce. In Malaysia particularly, though, we still have Generation X and the boomers, the baby boomers before them, control a lot of the decision making and the liquidity in terms of financial strength as well, obviously, and of course leadership of organizations. So by that I mean, to simplify it, is that we still have very few Gen Y, or for that matter, it's impossible, but Gen Z CEOs. And we've got the majority of Gen X CEOs still very much so in this market. And I think that is a prevalent trend that is across Southeast Asia. So bringing that into context, I want you to understand that we are in a very exciting era where we're dealing with several different types of generations in one workplace at any given time. And how do we connect with each other? How do we become more synchronized? How do we become more unified? Believe it or not, it has a lot to do with being true to yourself and being able to identify your passion or your purpose as early on in life. As I move forward, though, I'm going to explain the difference between what passion truly represents and what purpose is as well. And I'll put that into perspective for you guys so you're more clear on that. But now that we've talked about the different generations that we're interacting with, I want to go on to one of the biggest opportunities that we have today. And this is directly connected to what I'm talking about here. As we've moved into the digital age, our approaches to achieving a purpose or a dream have changed on so many levels, as well as in terms of what's possible today and what's not. And to me, that is a massive opportunity. It's an amazing opportunity because let me give you an example for you to understand what I mean. Let's go back 30 or 40 years ago. Let's go back to like my dad's time. And during his time, let's just say he wanted to become a thought leader, he wanted to become an influencer, and he wanted to do it quick and fast. There was no internet back then. There was no social media. Well, there was, but it was a very primitive form, right? And there's no concept of social media in which you could contribute intellectual property. And by that, I mean writing articles, blogging, so on and so forth. And it's amazing of such a paradigm shift that we live in today. Fast forward into the future, anybody, whether you're Gen Z, Gen Y, Gen X, baby boomer, anybody can just pick up a laptop or a tablet and start writing down an article. They can blog now, and the rest of the world can read that blog, right? You can feel someone's influence, even though they're sitting somewhere in their own bedroom writing articles, but they can gather hundreds, if not thousands of followers. And through those followers, they create a movement. And I'm going to talk about this a little bit later. And it's really, really crucial that we clarify this mechanism, because this is the mechanism and this is the flow that you would need to use in order for you to translate a dream in the digital age into a profitable purpose. And I'm going to talk about that later. But what I want you what I really want to drive home on this slide is that there's a huge opportunity for us in the digital age that we live in. And a lot of us take that for granted. And we need to start waking up to the reality that we can actually be whatever we want in a much more faster, rapid manner than how it was in the past. And I think, to quote Gian Leonhard, who's a very well-renowned futurist and one of my role models, he said, things and change has stopped happening gradually, and today it happens exponentially. And that's very true with a lot of the success stories you hear about today. You know, what took 10, 15, 20 years ago to build into a profitable purpose as a captain of industry. So, for example, Tony Fernandez. Would Tony Fernandez's journey be very much like Richard Branson's? No, Richard Branson, when he did Virgin, took a much longer time to reach what Tony's status is today. And Tony reached it in just a couple of years. Why? There's so many factors, but a lot of it has to do with social media and the age of digital that we live in. So remember this opportunity, this awesome time we're living in. I want you to know this as we go further into the topic. Okay, so before we learn or we go into what we should be doing, there is something that I do want to, and I figured this out. It took me a long time to figure this out, because I was always under the impression that successful people are people who just continually obsess over their passion. That is true. Don't get me wrong, it is true. But again, to take the example of Simon Sinek, why do I take Simon's example? Because later on, I'm going to recommend a book that you should read. If there are any students or even working professionals, I truly would recommend you read this book, because it's very insightful from a leadership perspective, but it's also very insightful from reaching out to yourself inside and understanding why you do the things you do and how to improve on them. But coming back to this particular slide, the idea is probably not that successful people follow their passion. They start to develop the ability to critique that particular subject matter. And what do I mean by that? They pick an interesting topic and they go ahead and start establishing a business around it. But how do they establish that business? They start to bring in as many followers online as possible. They start to influence people online through blogs, through videos, through speeches, through speaking engagements, so on and so forth. So while it was an interesting topic, and Simon's topic was always the millennial workplace, and that's what he's really excelled in. He loved the subject, but if you think about it, he never followed it. He never let the particular subject drive him. What he did was he actually started becoming an icon. And from the very beginning, he projected the reality. Even when he wasn't an expert, obviously everyone starts out from zero. So when Simon started out, I'm sure he didn't have the credentials he had from day one. He started out, so his mindset was not to compete with others in that same area. His mindset was to dominate. And that's very important for students, especially right now. Whatever you choose in life that you want to do as a passion, or you feel as a purpose, or it's a dream that you want to turn into a business of profitability, realize that your mindset needs to be around dominating that market, not competing with others. And that's very powerful, because when you think like that, you are doing something that I think Vision from Mind Valley talks about, which is consciously engineer your mind to break through a limit in your own head. And believe it or not, we have a lot of limits in our own heads, especially around dreams and so on and so forth. So domination of a market means you have a completely different stance. You approach the market differently. You don't look at other people and follow their example. You come up with your own unique ideas, and you look at first mover advantage. You look at being the first of something within that field, and you find a niche within that field and you make it your own. You dominate that space. So I want you to understand that before you jump into something impulsively, plan things out, and also plan it from a perspective not to compete, but to dominate. So the question I want to ask, and this is a rhetorical question, obviously. The question is that Got Purpose is obviously a marketing tagline that I've used as a sort of as a jest here, but really, you'll be surprised how many people don't have a purpose in life. You'll be surprised how many people just go through life existing and not living, not being happy. And being happy is what it's really about, truly, because when you're happy, truly, work starts looking a lot less like work, and it starts feeling a lot less like work. So it's really important that as I'm going through this webinar with you, I want you guys to think and ask yourselves, what could be a purpose in my life? What are the things that really drive me? What do I feel really strongly about? Think about it, because I want this webinar to have an impact on the audience, not just because it's me who's speaking. No, I want it because I truly want this to help you guys. And I hope in the future that this would be something that would enable you to reach that life's purpose and that goal that you have in your mind, and you haven't found it, you haven't articulated it. Hopefully this creates clarity for you. Let's sort of dissect the difference between passion, purpose, and vision. And I do this through a very simple dictum that I heard from Dr. Mark Schaefer, also a very renowned specialist in generations. He speaks about your passion is ignited by your purpose, and your vision enables you to imply that spark to change the world. Now, you'll see through this saying that passion and purpose are actually two different things. Your passion, which is the action of you taking, or is the will to act, and that is your passion. Your purpose is the particular goal that drives you. And a lot of people kind of use this term interchangeably. But the reality is they're two different things. They work together very closely, but they're two different things. Your passion wakes up inside of you like a flame when you pursue your purpose. And when you discover it too, you start feeling that spark inside of you. And you then develop a vision as to, you wake up every morning, open your eyes, and you can see it. You can see it 5 years from now. You can see yourself being that somebody who is going to change something in this world, right? Remember this, because it's very important for you to be able to differentiate between the two things. Because when you speak about this, and many of you may one day want to speak about this with your peers, with your father, with your mother, with your girlfriend, with your wife, whoever you speak to, clarify it. Explain to them the difference between how passion and purpose works together, how vision comes out of that whole thing. So here's where we get to the meat. The meat is, how do we actually go about transforming a dream that you have and create a profitable purpose out of it? Now, this is an ethos that I've created. This is a mechanism, or a methodology, if you will, that I've created, that I think, after looking at my own life, in many ways, I followed these 4 steps. And they've kind of worked for me in many ways. Throughout the successes and failures of my own life, I've seeing that whenever I follow these 4 steps in everything that I do that I'm passionate about, I see that it truly brings about an actual change in someone else's mind, and a change in people around me, the company I work for, my customers, my partners. And we call it DC3, or DC cubed actually. DC cubed is basically 1D and 3 Cs. And that's why I called it DC cubed. And it starts off with 1, discovering, and then 2, creating, 3, communicating, and 4, captivating. And I'm going to deep dive into each of these steps and show you why each of these steps is so crucial for you to take a dream that you might have in your mind or a simple idea and turn it into something that's more business oriented or more credible or more tangible, not just monetarily wise, but also in terms of your own life's contentment. So let's start off with discover. Discover represents what I call being able to spend time with yourself on, if not a daily basis, but on a semi-weekly basis, asking yourself, what do I stand for? Who am I? What do I want to do in life? You need to discover it, because if you're not going to be able to go on a scene of discovery, you'll realize that it's effectively this whole process is a waste of time if you haven't spent time with yourself to understand and answer these questions. So the first thing you need to do is understand the difference between the dreams in your head and the reality of them, which means developing a self-awareness inside of yourself where, yeah, great, an idea or a dream sounds fantastic in your head, but talk to people about it. Talk to as many people as you can, and preferably talk to people who aren't necessarily people who might take that idea from you. Obviously, I'm not saying to be dumb about it. Be a bit smart about it. Don't have a direct link with that particular industry. Talk to people maybe that are in similar industries but not directly involved, and tell them about your ideas. Share that with mentors. Share that with your parents. Talk to them about it, because bounce these ideas off people. The more you'll get more different opinions, and I don't want those opinions to confuse you. What I'm doing is I want you to be able to understand the difference between what you expect to achieve through that dream of yours in head and all the reality that's being said to you by these other people. And sometimes you can actually create a compromise between the two of them. You can then see, oh, okay, this is what people have been telling me, and so is an entrepreneur. He's done that. He's been there, done that. He's successful. And then I spoke to somebody else. I spoke to a teacher. She explained this to me. And then all that is food for thought for you to compare in your head versus what people are saying on the ground in reality. So the difference between those two things will always lead to primarily one major factor in your life: stress, right? Why do I say this? Because I think stress is the #1 reason why a lot of people end up failing in anything they do in life. And that means including pursuing a passion. Because believe it or not, while people say, find something you love and you never do a job one day in your life, even, meaning that it basically means that, to paraphrase, it means that, if you find something you love, it doesn't feel like work. But the reality is it will be work. It will always be work. There will always be an effort that you need to put in to pursue even your passion. You'll have a lot of fun doing it, yes. You'll enjoy doing it. It'll be a challenge that you love taking on, but that doesn't mean that there's no work involved. There's a lot of effort, there's a struggle, and if you don't believe me, look at all the major success stories around us. You want to talk about Mark Zuckerberg, you want to talk about Richard Branson, Tony Fernandez, Jack Ma. Every one of them has gone through an immense amount of stress and failure before they got anywhere in life. So the reality is that we can't just live our lives on dictums and fairy tales. We need to be realistic about it. And you need to learn how to manage your stress, because believe it or not, you're going to feel a whole lot of it. So how are you going to manage your stress? That's where you need to develop a balance in your life. The key to, I think, successful businesses is the ability for the partners or anybody who's involved, the ideators, whoever, the team, for them to understand the balance between running after something with a passion and just overworking yourself to the point where things are just miserable for you. And you need to realize how to strike a balance there. It's very important. So this is one of the mistakes I made in my earlier part of the life. I actually spent 10 years working for different companies and different industries, and I got a whole lot of experience in enterprise business development, building teams, managing them, talking to people, motivating them, so on and so forth. And you know, one thing that I realized, and one of the things that I regret, is always convincing myself to procrastinate, and convincing myself not to get started because of an excuse, because I was waiting for some other milestone, because I was, okay, I'm gonna do this one more thing, and I'm gonna get this one more opportunity, and then I'll do it. And it was always a reason not to start, you know. And I'm so glad a couple of years ago, when I first discovered that truly my passion is to engage with millennials, inspire them, and to engage with people in general, and to inspire them and to make them better versions of themselves, as opposed to emulating everyone else around them, is that you don't need to be perfect to get started. You just need to get started. And this is something that I'm still struggling with. Honestly, it is something I still struggle with, because many a times in the pursuit of perfection, I'm unable to look at the bigger picture at times. And I wish for all of you to overcome this challenge, because this is something really important, because this is something that will hold you back in your career over time. Sometimes you need to let go and just get started. And things will, not to say they'll fall into place, but things will start getting better. You will have more time to be strategic about things as you go along, but it's important that you take action first and you get started. So for those of you who are thinking, okay, at this stage of discovery, I'm a bit lost. I have these 3 simple steps, and these are basically 3 questions that you should ask yourself. 1, what are your strengths and weaknesses? What are your talents? Think about that. What are you really good at? And what is it that you would love to do if nobody interrupted your day? What are you good at? What are you passionate about? Do you feel really, really excited about a particular topic when it comes up with friends or family? So what are you passionate about? And finally, what would you like to change in the world? Forget it. So we haven't gone on to create, communicate, and captivate yet. So at this stage, all I want you to think about is, what would you like to change in the world if you had the chance to do it and it could be done immediately? What makes you angry? What really gets under your skin? And you know, if you had a chance, you'd take it on and you'd solve that problem. These are the 3 questions I think would really help you understand what your purpose is in life. Not just a pinpoint sort of like, oh, wow, this is what it is. No, but it definitely will take you down a path where you get closer by to finding and identifying those goals in your life. So these are some of the tips that I would share with you guys as somebody who's actually dealt with this for the last 10 to 12 years. And this is something that I do on a daily basis. Although I don't manage to often answer all of them, but I definitely make it a point to try to do this. So step 1, what we call consciousness engineering, and Vishen at Mind Valley does a lot of this work. So you should check out his work. It's very, very good. But I think it's important for us to ask ourselves in the mornings when we start up, what do I discover today? What do I want to discover? What do I want to find out today? Because you don't want to be one of those people who accidentally comes across new knowledge. No, you want to be proactive about it. You want to be the person who discovers something on purpose. You want to be clear about, okay, today I'm going to dedicate myself to discovering this, you know. And on the way, if you discover something new, that's a bonus. That's great. But make a conscious decision. Start engineering your mind consciously, not just unconsciously. So the next thing that I do is I always ask myself, what's something new that I tried? And it doesn't have to be something really massive or huge. It doesn't have to be like a big deal or anything. It doesn't have to be, doing a TEDx talk today. No, it can be It can be something simple, but it's something new that you tried. So put yourself in a daily challenge. Have a daily challenge every day. What's something new that I tried today? And content. This is like probably one of the most important things that you should do. Always ask yourself, what are you doing around the content that you're securing? And this is, I'm talking about primarily from a purpose point of view, from a knowledge point of view. What's the new knowledge that you're acquiring on that particular day? What are you doing to secure new information outside of yourself? Or what are you doing to unlearn something that you previously thought was true, but actually it's not, and you've broken that barrier, right? And how do you do that? So it's very important for you to pursue knowledge on a daily basis, whether it's from a book or through a podcast or through engaging with an expert or a mentor. It doesn't matter, but it's important that you do that. Fourth, thought leaders. Now, who dominates this space and why? Now, when you find out, when you come to a clue, when you come up with an idea, let's just say somebody goes, you know what, my passion is to pilot. You know, I want to be a pilot. Let's just say, I'm just giving you an example. Or maybe that's not the best example. Maybe you want to be a public speaking coach, right? This is, you want to be somebody who inspires people to be better speakers on stage. The first thing you should do, or one of the first things you should do, is definitely find out who are the thought leaders, who are the people who dominate this space, and why do they dominate it? Why am I asking you to do this? Because this will short circuit the best practices in your mind. It will allow you to understand, how did those people get from where they were, which was zero, to become a hero in that particular phase? And if you can learn from them and you can gauge their best practices, who knows, maybe your journey is a shorter one. And maybe it's a faster one. You don't know, right? So it's always good to understand who are the people who dominate this space, particularly this place that I want to be in. And finally, which is equally important, is sustainability. How many other people care about this particular area that I'm looking at? How many people would actually think that this idea is worth following, worth knowing? So sustainability is about how many other people truly care about this subject. And why is it important? Because when you want to build a business around something, you want to make sure there's a large enough audience around you that can take on your influence and your leadership. And they can potentially become your customers, your investors, and your partners. So that's how you short circuit your discovery. Let's go on to part 2, which is of the DC cubed methodology that I talked about earlier. Create. Now, creation refers to your personal proficiencies and your ability to create new things. Not know them. There's a difference between knowing and creating, and that's very important. I'll talk about that a little bit later. But right now, I want you to ignore the gray boxes, and I want you to look just at the blue box, right? And this is what we call the leadership code by the RBG group, and this is one of the models that we use to map on during our training for life skills at schools, universities, and at different organizations as well. And if you look at the personal proficiency blue circle in between, it spans from delivering results all the way down to having personal energy and passion. And I want you to look at all these particular areas, and I want you to ask yourself, are these areas that you're working on? Because trust me, you're going to want to walk budget and beyond expectations. This is very important. It's also really important for you to understand how to organize your own thoughts, which is what it means by practicing clear thinking. Do you have answers to this for yourself? Ask yourself this, because if you don't, it's high time you start, because these are the skills that will help you succeed more so than just the IQ aspects of academics in school or university. These are the things that will make you from good to go to great, right? Knowing and creating. So this is what I was talking about earlier. This is the information that I want to share with you around stage 2, create. How do you create, which means that the tagline of what this particular webinar is about, right? Creating a profitable purpose, a step-by-step guide. So this is step 2. A profitable purpose can only be created when you come up with an actual original idea. Yes, I know there's an argument around replicating ideas today. Why reinvent it when the wheel hasn't been broken? I understand that, that's true. But if you truly want to be an icon, If you look at Steve Jobs, if you look at Tony Fernandez, yes, true, the premise was similar to other people, true, but it wasn't a copied idea. They brought in their own flavor. They brought in their own unique humanness into their idea. Tony Fernandez brought it in with his persona, his charisma, with his spokesmanship, with his ability to market. Steve Jobs is the same, being a master marketeer. But it's very important, the difference, because we live in an age, it's very important to know the difference between knowing and creating. And why do I do this? And I'm going to give you an example again. Back in the day, it was given to my dad at his university. What did he have to do to build that research paper and submit it? He'd have to go and sit in the library for 3 or 4 days, nonstop, combing through book after book and reading on the subject matter. And unlike today, where we can just Google that particular keyword and we can find that information, they would have to read the breadth and width of that knowledge all the way top down. And what used to happen there was, yes, it wasn't as efficient as it is today, true, but what used to happen, which is really interesting, was the ability to grasp the overall knowledge base of that particular subject. You would not only end up having information about that particular keyword or that particular research title, but you would then be able to read around it and speak around it too, because you read books and books. And that created something very powerful. That allowed you to have enough width and depth of the information for you to create an idea. Whereas today, if we look at what we do, let's be honest, when I was in university, as a millennial myself, a lot of us used to just Google it and go back to like 3 or 4 pages back. And we used to slap together different entries online, paraphrase it, submit it to our lecturers, and call it a new idea, a new research hypothesis. But it wasn't. All we were doing is we were just knowing something. We just went and got ideas that we already somehow knew because we typed in this keyword in the first place, slapped them together and called it a new idea. But it wasn't. We didn't create anything new. And that's why it's very important to know the difference between knowing and creating. If you want to create a very powerful purpose in your life, you need to embrace the creation of new intellectual property, right? Coming up with content that will push the boundaries of that particular field. And then from there, what you want to do is, once you do feel that you have enough knowledge, you want to start creating a movement. How do you do this? You do this through social media. You build yourself as an influencer on social media. I'm not going to go into the particular platforms, LinkedIn, Facebook, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not going to go into that simply because we don't have enough time in this webinar to cover all that. So I'll talk about that maybe in another webinar as to how to activate digital platforms. But really, the idea is, why do you want to create a movement? Because you want to build up a following. And those followers, the ability for any profitable purpose or any company should be the ability to convert their followers, which could be customers, investors, or partners, and to turn them into their marketing ambassadors, to turn them into their marketing department. By that, I mean, you do such an awesome job and you have such influence that they speak on your behalf. And so, to quote a good friend of mine who's also an influencer on LinkedIn, Azlin, he always tells me, AJ, the idea is not to sell, but to make them buy. And that is very powerful. That's very true. If you can create ambassadors out of people through your influence, you don't need to pitch as often because they will become your marketing department for you. And this all leads to the final step of becoming known. And that's what the journey of creation really is. Once you know how to create real compelling stories and content about your area and your purpose, you will start to become known. And I'll talk about becoming known a bit later as well. There's a step-by-step procedure on how you can become known. I know a lot of people might be thinking, well, how do I become known? And I'll talk about that a little bit later. But it's all about becoming known, right? And this brings me to the most important element and the most important ingredient of you following your dream and then turning it into a profitable purpose. In today's digital age, you cannot convert your dream into a profitable purpose without building your brand digitally. Yes, building it offline is a step in the right direction, but it will not get you from good to great. You will not become somebody who will change the world. You won't become an icon. You won't become a a captain of industry if you do not embrace the digital age and start building your brand online. And by that, I mean truly engaging with people online, helping them without any expectation of return, building communities around trust and loyalty. It's all about building a brand through being human. I'm not saying being unprofessional, don't get me wrong. A lot of people confuse being human online as casual and unprofessional. That's all I'm saying. I'm saying create your unique flavor, create your own unique style online. You know, be who you are. Because believe it or not, people buy from people they like. If you want to create a profitable purpose, you need to create a brand that's truly trustworthy and creates a sense of loyalty. And the best way of doing that is through online platforms like Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat, the list goes on. Now, why are we doing this? Why do we build a brand online? Why are we doing this? Some people might ask me, AJ, so why do we do this, right? We do this because we want to be in the right place at the right time with the right attitude. And how do we do this? Because the more you are online, the more you're building your brand, the more active you are, the more of an influencer you become, the more likely you will be able to access opportunities that come your way. You will be in the right place at the right time with the right attitude. You'll be surprised the amount of reach and exposure you have if you actually start focusing and truly building an online brand, right? So that brings us to step 3. Step 3 is communicate, which is very, very important. I say this to, I've talked to Harvard graduates about this too. I've talked to one of my mentees is a Harvard graduate, and I've always told them this. I said, what's the use of being the smartest lawyer or business graduate when you can't even articulate yourself in an interview, when you're socially awkward, and your intelligence then becomes a reason for you to not be approachable by the market or by anyone else around you, right? Instead of creating a sense of humanness where people can approach you and you can be a benefit to them, a value and effective to them, you end up being ineffective, because the very IQ that you're basing your entire life around is the reason why you're not able to connect with people, right? So you need to step out of that whole ethos of blue blood, where I've got a degree from Harvard. I don't need to try anything. I'm good. I don't need to. No, you do. You need to learn skills that are what we call life skills. You do need to learn how to better engage people, how to inspire people, how to motivate teams, how to work with different cultures, diversity. These are things that a lot of times are underplayed in academic environments, and we need to change that, which is why I said earlier, communication is so important. Articulating yourself and articulating your brand and your passion to the world is key for you to succeed, right? Now, I've been talking a lot about Simon Sinek, and Simon is a role model for me. And why do I say this? Because he is in the same space that I truly believe we should all be thinking about. I don't necessarily agree with everything that Simon says, but I do recommend that you read this book, because this book is very powerful. Start with why. And I recommend that everybody picks up a copy and reads it, because it definitely has changed my life and changed the way I think of things. But really, what I want to do is I want to zoom into this particular area. So we're on communicate, right? And this is how you communicate your vision to the world, your purpose, and how you build an actual company around it. You need to answer the golden circle, which is what Simon talks about. Simon talks about, A, why do you do what you do? And what's the purpose behind it? Why are you doing it? And how do you do what you do? How are you going to do it? How are you going to accomplish that purpose? And finally, what do you do? What are the actions and what are the steps you're taking to actually accomplish that goal? Once again, I'd recommend you read this book, because this is something that's definitely changed my perception of a lot of things. This is the way you can build an ability to communicate your dreams with the outside world, whether it's online or offline. Right. I want to finish off step 3 of the Profitable Purpose Guide with this one particular statement, which is always communicate for the future, not the present nor the past. And why is this really powerful? I think this is powerful simply because a lot of people limit their communication to the moment right now, this moment right now. So I'm going to express what I feel right now. But what people need to do is make, like we talked about earlier, consciousness engineering. We need to start thinking about the words we choose to say at any given time, right? We need to be particular about how we communicate our dreams and our passions. I'll give you a simple example. You can word a post in a particular way on LinkedIn, and then you can use the same way, the same words, and do it on Facebook. And you believe it or not, you might get a ton of likes on Facebook, but you'll get 0 or 2 or 3 likes only on LinkedIn. Why? Because it's very important for you to understand communication needs to be altered and maneuvered given the situation you're in. And this is something very important because when you're standing in front of an investor who's giving you an opportunity to pitch your business to them, you need to know how to do this. Because if you don't, you're going to end up hitting a lot more roadblocks before you hit success, right? Which is going to happen anyway, but at least let's make the journey a little bit more easier, right, guys? So step 1, when I say always communicate for the future, not the present for the past, but I say step 1 is perception is reality. So always keep your CIP, I call it the SIP factor, right? Which is your customer, investor, and your partners factor in your mind when you're communicating, both online and offline. By that, I mean, when you say something or when you talk about your business, you talk about your dream, and if you're building a business around it, you're building up startup and you're getting into entrepreneurship, or you're doing intrapreneurship. Intrapreneurship is the ability to take an idea within an existing company you work for and introducing it to them as an employer. Either way, whether you're an entrepreneur or an intrapreneur, always keep in mind your CIP factor when you're communicating. Why? Because you want to word things in a way that's attractive to your customers and your partners. You want to say things that compel all these 3 groups, no matter where you are and when you are, right? Step 2, actually point 2, sorry. Step 2, point 2 is manage your finances. But a lot of the times I see, you know, at the end of the day, the reality is that we all need money to survive. The truth is that, you know, we can't run charities. That is the truth. And we don't run charities. We do it for a commercial gain. And there's no harm in accepting that. But I think one of the things that I've seen is that many times people don't stick it out or let time pass because they make finances an excuse to dictate that success and that failure. I know it's easier said than done, guys. I know a lot of people might think, yeah, it's easier said than done, AJ. But no, you know what? It's not. It be that person who tries to look at your finances in a way that, yes, you drive the business, but it doesn't dictate what your next steps are that's good for your demographic or your market or for your own happiness. It's important that you do things in a balance. I wouldn't say blow yourself out silly broke, but I'd say, you know what, there's an opportunity for you where you might have to suffer. And I think all of us go through that. You to be smart, don't sacrifice your basic requirements on a month-to-month basis because you need to survive. But anything beyond that, try to find a way to drive your success and your failures on the basis of passion and not money. And the third factor is leverage digital. And I talked a lot about social media earlier, and I talked about building your brand. But it's important for us to leverage digital in a way that we control digital and we don't let it control us. And by that, I mean, so many people spend a lot of time going through life where they create an alter ego on social media, and they truly believe that what's happening on social media is equivalent to what their success is in real life. Wake up call, no, it's not. A lot of the stuff that we face, you know, a lot of people create this glamour online about, oh, this is amazing, this is how my life is, this is how awesome my business is doing. The truth is, when you sit down with them and get to know them very well, they have the same problems, or if not the same problems, they have their own set of problems. So it's really important for you to understand that leverage digital in a way that you're in control of it, but it doesn't control you. Don't get carried away with it. And finally, it's not just about content. It has to be the right content. And furthermore, it has to be consistent. If you want to be an influencer and you want to build that brand, which is crucial for you to build towards that dream into a profitable purpose, you need to become an influencer. And by that, I mean you need to start identifying the right content and start sharing it consistently with the communities you want to build. Right. So some of you might be thinking, how does this connect with, how does passion and profit connect? AJ's been talking about moving away, not just about the money, but also about happiness, right? To money. Let's talk about a little bit about money as well. We talk about profits. Now, there's been a study in Johns Hopkins and a couple of other universities and an alliance in the US where they talked about the correlation between these 6 circles. Found out, interestingly, that passion is a direct correlation to your profits. How passionate you are can actually dictate how much money you can particularly drive out of a particular account that you're dealing with, right? And the more passionate you are, the more happy you are, may actually result in more money accumulated in that particular account. Moving on to purpose, if you look at purpose, the exact opposite is loyal customers. When you can actually share your vision and share your purpose with the rest of the world through building your brand, and if you're an influencer at that stage, people will start to be loyal to you, not because of what you're selling, but because of your own personal brand, your own personal purpose, which is very powerful. That means that you don't have to pitch so much because people walk up to you and ask you, hey, you know what? I'm a huge fan of what you do, and can I engage you for my own company? And finally, it all connects and ties up with, if you're going to be able to build a business around this, the first question you need to ask yourself is, what is the culture I want to build around me? What the team members around me? I can't do this possibly on my own. There's no I in team, and we know that. Obviously, it's, it's a very predictable line, but it's really true. It is true. How are you going to connect your team together? How are they going to synergize? And how are we going to create real engagement amongst the employees in your startup? How are people going to connect with each other and be happy working together? And so what I want to do is I want to show you guys that all these 6 areas are actually directly connected to each other. And these studies have proven this. Statistically, companies and people who drive their visions around these 6 cornerstones, and they actually follow through on their passion, purpose, and building a culture in their company to reflect that passion and purpose, end up actually seeing a lot more success a lot more quickly than people who don't. And finally, we're coming to the end of the webinar. I think, let's see if I find this. Okay, so we're nearly 2 minutes. I'll be done in about 5-10 minutes now, and then we'll be going into questions. Number 4 is captivate. And this is probably the most crucial aspect of DCQ. You need to captivate the world. You need them to believe in you. And how do you do that? Captivate basically means what I mentioned earlier, becoming known, right? It's about being known. And how do you become known? Well, a lot of the stuff I talked about earlier, the branding online, and all that other stuff, it's very important. But there are 4 key areas that you should focus on in terms of becoming known. 1, when you're talking about your purpose, and when you're thinking about your own purpose, and if you're toying with the idea of building a business around it, let's look at Simon's example. Simon Sinek. Let's go back to Simon. Simon Sinek found a purpose that he could be known for. And on top of that, very importantly, he found an audience willing to pay him for what he does. It's very important that you do that. And how can you do that? By talking and sampling the market as much as possible, doing your homework. Whether it's surveys, whether it's social media, do it any which way you want, but find out if the area that is your purpose, is it sustainable? And is there an audience that's willing to pay you for it? It's not going to be easy, I won't lie to you, but you have to do it. The second factor of becoming known, the space. Now, if you look at Simon, again, he identified a potential sustainable interest around the millennial workforce. And Simon speaks about that on a regular basis. He's built his whole company, his whole personality around this. But a key to success is the fact that he's in a particular niche within that area that nobody else is really in yet. Yeah, there are people close by, but they're not exactly the same thing. And Simon's carved out a bit of a uniqueness in his own niche. And because of that, nobody else was becoming known about intergenerational disconnects like Simon Sinek was. a couple of months ago in Malaysia, his video interview with a particular host became viral, where he was talking about Gen Y, Gen X, and I'm sure some of you saw it. How could he become viral like that? How did he do that? Because he's found a space that's unique and somewhat uncontested in that niche, right? Evidence, and he's actually doing more than other people than just passing opinions. Well, sorry, not finally, second last is the fuel, right? In the digital age, your currency is content. Currency is data and content. So Simon started blogging because he loved writing, and his passion for a subject and the personality shined through. It really, really shined through there. It made it so that, in a way, the content he was sharing used to compel the audience. And if you look at his content, you'll see that it wasn't ever traditional postings that a lot of other people would do, which don't get that much of engagement. It was stories. It was compelling sayings. It was things that came out of it. And you'll notice that a lot of what Simon talks about is his own stuff. He doesn't quote somebody else. He comes up with his own content, which goes back to knowing versus creating. Right? And finally, within Captivate, is the fact that the value of your content is zero unless people see it and share it. So Simon's business also depended on the viral element of his audience being big enough to take forward his messages. If his audience wasn't there, then Simon Sinek would be pretty much non-existent. We wouldn't know who he was, right? But the combination of building a brand online with writing books much beforehand, his passion to write, combined allowed him to move enough people to create a movement in which he is now thriving, both profitably in terms of money, as well as being happy what he's doing, right? And that brings us to the final slide of today's webinar. Before I recap, I want to thank everybody for coming on board and spending this hour with me and the Future Labs team. It's been a privilege talking to all of you. I've seen some questions on the side here, and I'm going to answer those questions after I wrap up. But just to do a quick recap on everybody who's listened in. Today's sharing was about 4 things, and I call it DC Cube. 1, be true to yourself and discover who you are and your purpose. 2, create. Don't just know and replicate. Create something unique. Create a differentiation. 3, communicate that way. Communicate it in a way that builds trust and loyalty with your communities online. Remember, being digital in this age is not a nice to have, it's a must have. And finally, everything you do has to captivate, has to amaze people. Why? Because it's not about showmanship and glamour. It's about being able to compel people into action. And that's where you're going to create real following and real movement. So remember that. These are the 4 steps, and I hope today has been insightful for you. I'm going to go on to the questions, but thanks very much. I've just finished off the webinar. Let me jump into questions right now. Okay, so we have the first question here, which is, what is more important, passion or drive? If I can say so myself, I think the drive comes from passion. I think if you've identified a purpose in life and you actually are pursuing that, the pursuing of that purpose is your passion, correct? Because that's something that was apparent to everybody around you, even to yourself. It'll be apparent to everyone around you because they see how passionate you are about that particular area. But if you move forward from there and then you ask yourself, okay, what keeps me going? That's your drive. You know, people around you will be like, how do you keep going, man? How do you just not stop? And that's where, you know, that's your drive. So if I think about it, it's not probably an either or question. It's more like, it's important for you to have that passion because you will innately then have that drive, right? Let's talk about, thanks a lot, Chernlock. Let's talk about Frank's question. I hope that answered your question though, Chernlock. Frank asked, how do we, the younger generation, influence the older generation to keep up with our digital abilities? I think one of the things that, being a millennial myself, I feel that we can learn a lot from the older generation too. I think both sides suffer from shelving blame on each other. We have Gen X and Gen X and baby boomers somewhat complaining sometimes, sharing their opinions about how rushed, how undependable at times, how sometimes not loyal the millennials are because of the nature of this market. But quite frankly, I don't think it's their fault. I think they're a product of, of a different generation. They were parented by people as well, right? A lot of it has to do with parenting as well. But to answer your question, to summarize, is that we need to step away from all these opinions with each other as to where the younger generation, they're the older one. I think the very segregation and the very separation of recognizing somebody as old and us as young is a reason as to why there's so many differences of opinion. And it's causing more harm than good. I think what needs to happen is for us to actually sit down and realize that there are 13-year-old, 14-year-old kids who might be digital natives who are Gen Z, but they still don't know how to use LinkedIn. They don't know how to use certain platforms either. And then there are baby boomers who are 70, 75 years old, who are CEOs of companies who are on WhatsApp and they use WhatsApp regularly. There are paradoxes. There are situations in which people can't explain and categorize a particular Gen Y or a particular Gen X. So why do we segregate them? Why do we categorize them? Let's come up with a completely new platform where we connect each other. And I'm calling it Generation C. I don't have an official name for it, but I definitely think it's a movement that we need to create. It's a movement that I'd like to create. This is my passion, to create a movement of Generation C, where we don't look at age, title, and generations. We look at what unifies us, what connects us, what synergizes us, so that it creates a more unified workforce, right? I think the way we can influence the older generation is by being able to connect with them. And one of the biggest way we can connect with them is through technology. There are a lot of people who are using some form of technology, including my mom. She's 70 years old, she still uses WhatsApp, right? The idea is for you to be patient and tolerant, and vice versa. They need to be patient and tolerant too. That's how we can answer this. And I'm not saying that's the whole answer, but I'm saying that's definitely the beginning of the answer, right? Now, I've got a question from Facebook. I don't have the particular username, but I know it's a question from Facebook. Tips to avoid procrastination. You and me both, buddy. You know what? I would be lying if I told you that I don't procrastinate. I think we all do at some point in time in our lives. And somebody who tells you they don't procrastinate, they're either superhuman or they're lying to you. And I think the reality is that the best way to overcome procrastination is DC cubed. And by DC cubed, I mean every one of these steps. Don't wait for you to be perfect. And I think that's one of the biggest reasons why I procrastinate. I procrastinate because a lot of the reasons that I hold myself back in doing something is because I believe that I have to be perfect before it even begins. And I think that lends to a lot of the reasons why we procrastinate. So don't do that. Start no matter where you are, no matter how basic you feel you are, no matter how unprepared you feel you are, but just try something. Take massive action. Do something that will create an impact around those around you, right? So to overcome procrastination, I think it all begins in the mind. Convince yourself that you need to act and not just dream. Like I said in the very beginning of this presentation, in this webinar, dreamers stay dreamers without massive action. So start taking action. Just get up and do something small, I know I said the word massive, but it doesn't need to be a massive step. It can be just a step that you take closer to your goal. And that's where it comes into understanding how to break down a dream into goals, right? You need to have a plan. Once you have that plan and those steps, taking action every day and procrastinating will become something of the past, right? I hope that helped you. Let's see, question from Quora. How do I portray my personality online into a brand in my business? How to make people believe me? Oh, wow, that's a loaded question, man. Um, that's a webinar on its own. How to self-brand yourself in personal branding, which, by the way, I do for a variety of different forums. I specialize within millennials, and I also specialize around digital transformation at a mindset level. So this is a very, very, I love this question. It would be, I think, to summarize it, because we've got so many other questions coming. So to summarize it, I think it would be really understanding what is it that makes you you. You know what I mean? It's not about being unprofessional or joking around or using, for example, LinkedIn and posting something that you put up on Facebook on LinkedIn. No, it's not like that. I'm saying find something that's uniquely you. Find something, ask yourself the questions that I asked you, that I showed you at stage 1 in Discover of BCQ. You know, ask yourself those questions, and I promise you, understand yourself. And when you do that, when you do finally understand yourself, you'll understand what is it that makes you better than other people in a particular area. What are your strengths and weaknesses? How do I avoid those weaknesses and augment and showcase my strengths, right? How do I turn those weaknesses into strengths, right? And that's truly what you need to do. You don't make people believe you. People will believe you if you are true to yourself and you share truly what is innately you, right? You don't need to make people believe you. They will believe you if you actually develop and go through these steps at DCQ. I hope that helped you. Frank is back, and he said, what websites and profiles do you follow that help you discover and build on your passion? Off the top of my head, I follow Tony Fernandez because I look up to him for the variety of business ethics and ethos that he brings to the market, what he's done. Jack Ma is somebody else, a profile. James Khan is somebody I follow in the UK. I'm also a huge fan of Jay Shetty in the UK as well. There are quite a few different people. I actually have a lot of mentors. In my own mind, I'm mentored by several people. I mentioned Gian Leonhard, Dr. Mark Schaefer earlier. But going back to what Frank's question was, right? What websites as well, not just profiles. Okay, websites. This is a phenomenal job of sharing insightful information. But I think the short and long of it, if you want to have a sort of like a one-stop all sort of thing, even though I feel as a platform, LinkedIn's content has at times been tweaked towards a more social element, which isn't necessarily always a good thing. Sometimes people are sharing things that they would typically share on Facebook, on LinkedIn now, which is probably against the whole point of LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a business platform for networking, matchmaking, and sharing business ideas and building up what we call the SIP factor, right? Your customers, investors, and partners. But I think LinkedIn still holds immense value for you, because if you go down the feed, you can see so many influencers and so many people sharing insightful articles. And the best thing is that, you know, some of these influencers, you can get in touch with them and talk to them. You know, so they're not just people up in the sky in ivory towers, they're people you can talk to. And more importantly, the very platform that I'm actually hosting from, FutureLabs, is something that you should definitely follow, right? You should definitely get onto FutureLabs. And if you aren't already, I'm assuming you might be already since you're on this webinar. But I definitely recommend anybody else who's not, or you should recommend this to your friends, that, you know, a platform like FutureLabs does immense benefits for you to bring in mentorship that brings in knowledge, and it supplies and complements the CQ in many rich ways. So I hope that answered your question, Frank. Joe, can I get a copy of the slide presentation or book recommendations? Yes, you can, Chats. You can indeed. Mr. Fikri Yuliandi, how to make peace between your purpose and the real world? How do I make peace? By peace, I mean, I suppose you're probably referring to how many a times your particular passion or your purpose, your particular dream might not be something that that others around you approve of, right? I'm obviously you're not here to answer, but what I'm gauging, and from that assumption, I'm going to answer the question. A lot of people around you are going to tell you that you're not good enough, you can't do this, there's no money in that. You name it, you'll hear it. But it's not about making peace. It's about you being able to believe in yourself. I wish I could tell you that there's one simple formula of you following it and then everybody will be on your side. I'm sorry, that isn't true. There'll always be people who will always. I'll give you an example. When I first started out becoming a trainer, a lot of people around me doubted me. A lot of people said, "Yeah, AJ, I don't see you motivating people. I don't see you doing it. I don't think you can really inspire anybody, right?" And it was really blunt feedback. It was good feedback because it pushed me to do more, but I didn't make peace with it. I used it as motivation. I never accepted that feedback. I just took it as food for thought, and I moved with it. I used it as an ability to channel it into my purpose. And that's what I recommend you do too. I recommend that you stop letting people put a finger in you and swirl it around and tell you what you should do. Instead, look inside of yourself and ask yourself those same questions and follow what's in your mind, but balance it with your heart. A lot of people feel that following your mind alone is the answer. In my opinion, it's a cross between your IQ and your EQ. You have to follow your heart as well. I hope that helped, Vikri. Mr. J, that's like Joker from the Batman, sorry. Can you give me a few examples of your dream, plan, and action? Okay, so my dream is to be the Simon Sinek or the Jay Shetty of Southeast Asia. That is my dream. I want to be a thought leader and an influencer at the intersection of how millennials interact with the digital age and how the other generations are trying to keep up. But sometimes it's not just about them keeping up, but it's also about us slowing down. And that there's value and wisdom in both sides working together. And I want to be not a competitor in that area. I want to be a dominator. I want to dominate that space. And it's a slow journey, but it's a steady one. And it's happening, but very slowly, right? And I'm working towards it. Mr. J, how can we get clear of the middle part? Sorry, I forgot. I realized that I haven't answered your plan and action part of the question. So the action I'm taking is I've looked at LinkedIn as a platform for me building influence around these areas, and that's the action I've taken. I also have gone ahead and within the organization, there are 3 partners, myself and 2 other partners. We 3 are very passionate about bringing about emotional intelligence into education and building life skills. So what I'm doing is I'm taking action by going to schools, universities, and corporates and talking about being empowered at an emotional intelligence level and not just academically. And I do that across it through a framework that we called Empowers. I hope that helped you. Your second question, how can we get clear of the middle part? I don't quite get the middle part. My aim is to become a CFO. And Amiral, I'll come back to your question in a bit. Don't worry, I'm not skipping. My aim is to become a CFO. My starting point might be taking finance degree, join any finance investing with a similar. But how can I make the middle part clear, such as career path? Let me repeat that question. I don't quite understand the question. My aim is to become a CFO, which is clear, and my starting point might be taking a finance degree, join any finance investing with seminar. But how can I make the middle part clear, such as career path? Okay, so what you mean is, how can you go from not being a CEO right now to becoming a CEO, right? As in being a fresh graduate who just has a finance degree and getting to a CFO, right? Okay, well, I think there's a certain element of this question that I can't answer simply because I'm not a finance professional. So I can't answer the exact areas within the financial scope. My partners probably would be better to answer that because they both come from a very strong number of years in finance and accounting. But at a very conceptual level, I would assume that what you really need to do is what we talked about in, we talked about. We talked about it in stage one, in Discover, in DCQ, right? Where you would have to understand the ability, it was before Discover actually, it was in the beginning of the webinar, where I talked about being able to break down a dream into a set of goals, like break down your goals into steps, working backwards and asking yourself, what are the steps that I need to take? Now, what those particular steps are for you to go from graduate to CFO, I'm not too sure. I can't answer that because I'm not a finance professional. But I would assume it would be you taking the initiative to constantly push the boundaries within fintech. Fintech is a huge platform right now. It's a huge booming space, not just in Malaysia, but across the region and across the world. I would say that if you wanted to become one of the more progressive CFOs today, you'd need to look at spaces that are pushing the boundaries. Look at what banks are doing differently today. One of the banks that I think you should really follow is DBS. It's the world's leading digital bank. Find out more about DBS. Find out their best practices. Spend a bit more time with CFOs who are mentors. Again, I'd recommend get onto FutureLabs. Find people who are very close to what you want to be in 5 years from now or 10 years from now. Talk to them, ask them questions. Effectively, work through DCQ and break them down into actionable steps. Believe me, if you talk to people on, for example, on FutureLabs, and their mentors that you can talk to who are within the finance field, I'm sure they can give you very particular technical steps to take. But in the meantime, I leave this with you that continue to push the boundaries and find out where the world is heading. Remember what I talked about at the communication stage. Always communicate for the future, not for the present and the past. So keep that in mind, right? Building a career is something that comes secondary before you find out what your true purpose is in life. It's important for you to find out. Amazing, by the way. All right, let's go. I hope that helped you. Amiral, in your opinion, what do you think sets apart entrepreneurs such as Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos from the rest of the pack? If I were to choose 2 words, it would be massive action, right? I think Elon in himself with Tesla and with everything else he's doing is, again, doing what I mentioned earlier with the previous question. He's pushing the boundaries, never switched off. I think there's never a time that he switched off. But most importantly, I think it's good that you brought up Elon Musk, because I think there's something that we can learn from him, is his humility. He's got an amazing sense of humility, and you can see that in the way he interacts with his customers. You've seen postings online of people complaining, his own employees mentioning something, and Elon himself has responded about the work-life balance and about how he cares about the safety of employees. A couple of weeks ago, we saw a concern of a particular owner of a Tesla model car, and Elon himself responded. If I'm not mistaken, it was Twitter or it was another platform. And he's got such humility. He has no awareness of how awesome and how prolific he is as an icon today. He is constantly on the move, constantly pushing those boundaries. And I think that's something that sets him apart, truly does. Humility sets us apart from a lot of things in life, right? And the same goes with Jeff, right? So I think we're running out of time and we've got a lot more questions, but let me try to wrap up what I can. My aim is to, okay, so I already answered this question. Can we have a webinar about how to leverage digital on achieve career, study, learning, startup, and networking? Yes, we certainly can. And I think that's probably going to be the next thing that I would want to talk about. And I'll talk to everybody here at FutureLabs about when I can have that. But yeah, I'm actually in the process of possibly building a working relationship with Magic in Malaysia as well. If you're from Malaysia, you might be seeing some of the work that I'll be doing with Magic in the future very soon. That being said, I'm super excited about leveraging digital as a mindset, because there's so many people around right now, not just Malaysia, but regionally, that talk about the technical aspects of how to do Facebook ads and how to all that sort of stuff. But it's very important for us to understand how to leverage digital and why we're doing it, to understand the mindset. And this is extremely important for CEOs as well, right? And I'd recommend not just students, but I recommend working professionals to make an effort to actually reach out to me and find out more about how their organization can shift away from being an organization that does digital to one that is digital. And that's what I'm consulting on with few very large and small companies, right? Middle path career such to speed up the process. Okay, I think I've answered that. DBS from Singapore. No, I'm talking about Deutsche Bank actually, which I do not. They do have obviously an office in Singapore, but I think it's Deutsche Bank, DBS, right? Yeah, and I think that is the conclusion of all our questions. Thank you very much for everybody who's listening in. I look forward to being back the next time. But in between now and then, you're going to get a whole lot of other mentors with exciting other topics. And yeah, and I always start off and I end with this as well. If you don't have a pulse, if you don't have a purpose, you don't have a pulse in life, right? So thank you very much. Oh, Mr. J, can I know how to spell that bank? Deutsche Bank, right? I'm gonna get somebody. Okay, I got some. So it's DEUTSCHE, Deutsche Bank. Well, here it's Deutsche Bank Malaysia Berhad, but globally it's Deutsche Bank, right? Hope you got that. Sorry about that, folks. What I was saying was, if you do not have a purpose, you don't have a pulse, and obviously that's a exaggeration, but you get what I mean. Thank you very much, everyone, and I hope to see you next time. This is AJ from Strategize and Future Labs signing off. Bye.